My daughter was on her knees, face soaked in tears, scrubbing the marble floor while her mother-in-law screamed, "Faster! Useless!" I pulled out my phone and did something that would change everything forever. What happened next left that wealthy family bankrupt. Where are you watching from today? Leave your location in the comments and like and subscribe to the channel. But let me tell you how I got to that moment 3 years earlier. The plane landed at JFK Airport in New York at 7:43 in the morning. 3 years. It had been 3 years since I last hugged my daughter Sarah. 3 years since she married Daniel Sterling in that intimate ceremony in Cleveland, where he promised to take care of her like a queen. 3 years of video calls that became more and more spaced out, where she always looked tired but insisted everything was perfect. My name is Linda Davis. I'm 54 years old, and if I have learned one thing in this life, it is that when a woman says everything is perfect with that dull voice, she is usually lying. But I, like a good mother, wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that my only daughter had found happiness with that tall, handsome man who spoke with such confidence and came from an important family in the Hamptons. The taxi drove through the streets while I tried to control my nerves. I had saved for 2 years for this trip, working double shifts at the hospital where I am a nurse. Sarah did not know I was coming. I wanted to surprise her. In my last video call 3 weeks ago, I noticed something strange. She had a bruise on her arm that she said she got while cooking. But her eyes, God. Her eyes had that empty look I had seen too many times in the hospital. The look of someone who is surviving, not living. "Ma'am, we have arrived," said the taxi driver, interrupting my thoughts. The Sterling estate was impressive. 3 stories of old stone, huge windows, and a garden that looked like it was taken from a magazine. This was the home of the important family. Daniel had sent me the address months ago, back when he still answered my messages. I rang the doorbell. Once, twice. On the 3rd ring, I heard voices inside. Screaming, an older woman yelling, and then Sarah's voice, weak, scared, apologizing. The door opened. A woman of about 75 with perfectly styled hair and a pearl necklace that probably cost more than my house. She looked me up and down with the kind of contempt only people with old money know how to perfect. "Yes?" Her voice was colder than ice. "I am Linda, Sarah's mother. I came to visit her." The woman's expression changed. For a second, I saw something like panic. Sarah is not here. She is traveling. Liar. I had just heard my daughter's voice inside. "I understand. When does she return? I can wait for her." "Not possible. The family is busy today." I was about to insist when I heard a crash inside. Something had fallen, or someone, and then the unmistakable sound of someone crying. "Excuse me?" I said, and before the old witch could react, I took advantage of her turning toward the noise to slip through the gap in the door and enter the house. Margaret shouted something, but I was already inside, walking toward the source of the sounds. What I saw broke my soul. Sarah was on her knees on the dining room floor, picking up pieces of a broken cup. Her hair was dirty and tied in a messy ponytail. She was wearing an old stained t-shirt and pajama pants. But what really destroyed me was her face. Pale, gaunt, with deep, dark circles, and an expression of absolute terror when she saw me. "Mom?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Sarah, what the hell is happening here?" The mother-in-law, because obviously it was Margaret Sterling, the matriarch of this nightmare family, planted herself between us. "This is my house. You need to leave. Now. I'm not going anywhere until I talk to my daughter." "Mom!" Daniel appeared on the stairs, impeccably dressed in a 3-piece suit, the same man who had sworn to love her. "Linda, what a surprise." "Surprise," I repeated, feeling the fury starting to boil in my veins. "Yes, I imagine so. Is someone going to explain to me why my daughter is cleaning floors like Cinderella?" "It is a misunderstanding," said Daniel with that rehearsed smile he probably used to close business deals. "Sarah was helping to..." Helping, I interrupted him. What a convenient word. And are the bruises on her arms also help? The silence that followed was so heavy it could have been cut with a knife. Sarah stood up, shaking. Mom, please, do not make a scene. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. I looked at my daughter, this strange, pale, and scared version of the brilliant woman I had raised, and something inside me broke, but not from sadness, from rage, a cold and calculating rage. Sarah, go pack your things. We are leaving. You cannot do this, shouted Margaret. She is married to my son. She is part of this family. Family. I spat the word. This is not a family. This is a damn slave house with a fancy facade. Daniel approached, and for the first time I saw the mask fall. His eyes became hard, threatening. Linda, I think you are tired from the trip. You do not understand how things work here. Wives have responsibilities. Responsibilities. I pulled out my phone. Like this responsibility? I showed him the photo I had just taken, Sarah on her knees, surrounded by broken glass, with his mother standing over her. His expression changed. Delete that. Now? Or what? Are you going to make me clean floors too? Margaret let out a bitter laugh. Typical low class. Always dramatic. Sarah is happy here. She has everything she needs. A beautiful house. Fine clothes. Fine clothes, I interrupted her, looking at the rags my daughter was wearing. Where exactly are those fine clothes? Because what I see is a destroyed woman living in a luxury prison. Enough. Daniel's voice was pure poison. You get out of my house immediately or I call the police. I smiled. It was a slow and dangerous smile. Please call the police. I would love to explain to them why my daughter is living in conditions of domestic abuse. I am sure the sheriff would be fascinated. I saw Daniel's confidence waver. Margaret said something to him quickly and furiously. He responded in the same tone. They were arguing, but keeping their smiles. What a theatrical family. Sarah, I said without taking my eyes off Daniel, I am going to ask you only once. Do you want to leave here? My daughter looked at me with tears falling down her cheeks. I saw the exact moment when something in her broke and put itself back together. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Mom. Please get me out of here. Perfect. I walked toward her and took her hand. Go pack the essentials. 5 minutes. She's not going anywhere. Margaret stood in the way. Everything she has belongs to this family. The dresses, the jewelry, everything was bought with sterling money. I looked the old harpy directly in the eyes. Perfect. Keep your blood-stained rags. My daughter does not need anything from this cursed house. Sarah ran toward the stairs. Daniel tried to follow her, but I planted myself in front of him. Do not even think about it. You are meddling. You know nothing about our marriage. I know enough. I know my daughter called me 6 months ago crying because your mother forced her to clean the toilets with a toothbrush. I know that 4 months ago she stopped wearing makeup on video calls because she had to cover bruises. And I know, I got close to him, that if you lay a hand on her again, it is not going to be the police who find you. It will be the morgue. Daniel went pale. Are you threatening me? No, honey. I am making you a promise. Sarah ran down with a small backpack. She had changed into jeans and a sweatshirt, clothes she had probably hidden because they were too ordinary for a sterling. Ready? She said, and her voice had a strength I had not heard in years. Margaret blocked the door. If you walk out that door, you are dead to this family, dead to Daniel. You will not see a cent of the sterling money. Sarah looked at her mother-in-law and, to my surprise, smiled. Perfect. I prefer to be poor than to be your slave again. We left that nightmare house while Daniel shouted threats and Margaret called I do not know who on the phone. I did not care. I had rescued my daughter from a hell with silk curtains. In the taxi back to the hotel, Sarah cried on my shoulder for 20 minutes straight. When she could finally speak, what she told me made me want to go back and burn that house to the ground. But I had something better planned because Linda Davis did not take revenge with fire. She took revenge with information. And I had taken more photos of that house than Daniel imagined. The hotel where I was staying was modest, a small room in downtown, far from the obscene elegance of the Sterling estate. Sarah showered for 40 minutes. When she came out with clean hair and wrapped in a white hotel robe, she looked 10 years younger. "Tell me everything," I told her, sitting on the bed next to her, "and do not tell me it is fine, because clearly it is not." Sarah looked at her hands. Her nails were bitten down to the quick. My daughter, who had always been so vain with her perfectly painted nails, it was gradual. She started with a trembling voice. At first, everything was perfect. Daniel was attentive, romantic. He took me to fancy restaurants, bought me designer clothes. But a week after the wedding, when we arrived in New York, everything changed. How? Margaret. Sarah spat the name as if it were poison. She controls everything in that house. Everything. Daniel does nothing without her permission. And from the first day, she made it clear that I was inferior. Inferior? From Cleveland, poor, without proper education. Sarah made air quotes with her fingers. According to her, Daniel had lowered himself by marrying me. I was a whim, a mistake that had to be corrected. I felt the rage bubbling again, but I kept it under control. And Daniel allowed this? Daniel is a coward. The words came out loaded with bitterness. He is a 38-year-old child who has never said no to his mother. When Margaret started assigning me household chores to teach me to be a proper wife, he just shrugged and said it was temporary. What kind of chores? Sarah took a deep breath. Cleaning, cooking, washing clothes by hand because, according to Margaret, machines did not clean well enough. Waking up at 5 in the morning to prepare breakfast. Serving them food while they ate in the dining room, and I stood waiting for them to finish so I could eat their leftovers. Sarah. My voice broke. That is not the worst, Mom. She wiped her tears. Margaret has 2 daughters, Ashley and Jessica. They live with their husbands in apartments Margaret bought them, but they come to the estate every day and treat me like their personal servant. What? Ashley makes me wash her clothes. Jessica makes me watch her kids without paying me. Once Jessica spilled red wine on an antique Persian rug on purpose and then told Margaret I had done it. They made me clean it with a toothbrush for 7 hours. 7 hours, Mom. I closed my eyes, trying to control the impulse to go back to that house and do something I would probably regret. Oh no, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you ask for help? Because I was ashamed. Sarah sobbed. You worked so hard to give me a good life. You paid for college. You supported me in everything, and I threw it all away to marry a man who turned out to be a complete fraud. I didn't want to admit I had messed up so spectacularly. Honey, listen to me. I took her face in my hands. None of this is your fault. Nothing. That family are monsters with money, and money doesn't erase monstrosity. It just puts it in a bigger house. Sarah laughed through tears. You always have a phrase for everything. 54 years of experience. I smiled. Now tell me, what else happened? 6 months ago, Daniel lost his job. That surprised me. What? But he always talked about his successful career in finance. Lies. All lies. Sarah wiped her eyes. He worked for a company that belonged to a friend of Margaret. She got him the job. But Daniel is incompetent. He arrived late. He didn't meet his responsibilities. He blamed others for his mistakes. Finally, they fired him. And what did he do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Margaret pays him an allowance from her own money. He spends days playing golf with his equally useless friends and nights drinking expensive wine in the study. So that whole story of his important position was a lie. His whole life is a lie. Mom, the house isn't Daniel's. It's Margaret's. The money is Margaret's. Even the car he drives is Margaret's. Daniel is a 38-year-old dependent who compensates for his failure by abusing his wife. Did he hit you? I asked, although I already knew the answer. Sarah nodded slowly. The first time was 4 months ago. I had cooked pasta for dinner, but I overcooked it a bit. It wasn't burned, just soft. Margaret made a scene. Daniel waited until everyone went to sleep and then came to the kitchen where I was cleaning. He grabbed me by the arm and slapped me. He told me I was embarrassing him in front of his family. I felt nauseous. And then it became more frequent. Once a week, then twice. Then every time something bothered him. Never on the face, always where clothes could cover the marks. It's calculated, Mom. He knows exactly what he is doing. Damn him, I muttered. Margaret knows. Everyone knows. Ashley once told me I should learn not to provoke him, as if it were my fault her brother is a violent coward. Sarah, did you file a report? With who? The police? The Sterlings have friends everywhere. Margaret plays bridge with the sheriff's wife. Daniel went to school with half the department. I tried to talk to a neighbor once, and the next day Margaret went to her house and I don't know what she told her, but the woman never spoke to me again. I stood up and walked to the window. The city stretched out before us, beautiful and indifferent. I thought about all the times Sarah had called me saying she was tired but happy, all the excuses not to come visit me, how her clothes became looser every time I saw her on video. We are going to destroy them, I said finally. What? I turned to her. The Sterlings. We are going to destroy them, legally, financially, and socially. Mom, we can't. They have too much power. They have money, which is not the same as real power, and I have something better. Proof. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I had taken. Sarah cleaning, the bruises on her arms, the look of terror on her face. But I had also taken photos of the house, the paintings on the walls, most importantly, the documents I had seen on Daniel's desk when I entered. What is that? Sarah asked. Invoices, bank statements, lawyer letters. I smiled. Your dear husband left his mail very conveniently in sight, and I, being the busybody I am, took photos of everything. Sarah looked at me with a mix of horror and admiration. Mom, that is illegal. Probably, but they are never going to admit that I left their private documentation within reach of an unwanted visitor, because that would mean admitting I am smarter than them, and people like the Sterlings would rather die than admit that. What did you see in those documents? I sat next to her again. Debts. A lot of debts. Turns out the fabulous Sterling family isn't so fabulous after all. Margaret has been using her own money to keep up appearances, but that money is running out, fast. What? The estate has a mortgage they are about to lose. Daniel owes money to 3 different casinos. Ashley and her husband are being sued for unpaid taxes. And Jessica. I laughed. Jessica is having an affair with her husband's personal trainer, and someone is blackmailing them with photos. Sarah's jaw dropped. How do you know all that? Because unlike the Sterlings, I do know how to read, and they are arrogant enough to leave evidence of their problems on desks, hoping no one is inferior enough to understand it. So, what do? I smiled. First, you are going to sleep. Then tomorrow we are going to talk to a very specific lawyer I know in the city. And then, my smile widened. We are going to see how fast an empire built on lies and borrowed money collapses. Sarah hugged me tight. I love you, Mom. I don't know what I would do without you. Fortunately, you will never have to find out. That night, while Sarah slept, I stayed awake planning. The Sterlings thought I was an ignorant woman from Ohio, easy to intimidate. They were about to discover that Linda Davis was neither ignorant nor easily intimidated, and that messing with my daughter had been the biggest mistake of their pathetic lives. The office of lawyer Matthew Richardson was on a narrow street in the business district. It wasn't the kind of fancy office the Sterlings would frequent. It was small, with old furniture and a smell of strong coffee that permeated everything. But Matthew had something the fancy offices didn't have, a deep hatred for rich families who abused their power. Tell me, said Matthew, a man of about 60 with gray hair and piercing eyes. I had found his name on an online forum. A woman had written, If you need legal help against cruel rich people, Matthew Richardson is your man. He cannot be bought. I told him everything. Sarah added details that broke my heart. How Margaret rationed her food, telling her she was getting fat and that no Sterling could be fat. How Daniel checked her phone every night and had forbidden her from contacting her friends in Cleveland. How Daniel's sisters called her the hillbilly when Margaret wasn't present. Matthew listened to everything without interrupting. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair and clasped his hands. "I know the Sterlings," he said finally. "I represented their housekeeper 10 years ago, Maria, a woman from Mexico. They accused her of stealing jewelry. It was a lie. Margaret had lost the jewelry gambling and needed a scapegoat. I won the case, but Maria had to leave the state. The Sterling family made sure no one hired her again. So you know what we are dealing with," I said. "Yes, and I also know how to defeat them." He smiled. "The Sterlings have a secret, a big secret they have kept for years, and I know what it is." Sarah and I leaned forward. "What secret?" "Margaret's fortune is not from her late husband, it's from her lover." The silence in the office was absolute. "What?" Sarah finally found her voice. Matthew opened a drawer and pulled out an old folder. 30 years ago, Margaret's husband, John Sterling, was a simple office worker. They lived in a small apartment. Then John died, suddenly. A month later, Margaret appears with a fortune. She said John had secret investments no one knew about. But it wasn't true, I said, seeing where this was going. No, the truth is that Margaret had an affair with Samuel Cole, a married and very wealthy man. When John died, Samuel gave Margaret the money to keep her quiet about their relationship. He had a sick wife and a reputation to protect. Margaret took the money and built the legend of John's successful businesses. "How do you know this?" Sarah asked. "Because Samuel Cole was my uncle. On his deathbed, he told me everything. He gave me documents, bank transfers, love letters, photographs. He made me promise that if Margaret ever hurt anyone else, I would use that information." I felt a smile grow on my face. "And we are that someone else." "Exactly. But there is more." Matthew pulled out another document. "I have been investigating Daniel since you called yesterday. Turns out he not only owes money to casinos, he has also been falsifying invoices in his mother's company's name." "What company?" Sarah asked. "Margaret has a small textile import company. It's not very profitable, but it gives her prestige. Daniel has been creating fake invoices, charging the company for services he never provided, and pocketing the money. We are talking about $200,000 in the last 2 years. And does Margaret know? No. She's too proud to check the accounting books. She trusts Daniel to handle the company finances, which," Matthew smiled, "is her second biggest mistake. The first was messing with you. So what is the plan?" I asked. Matthew spread several documents on the desk. First, we file for divorce for Sarah. We allege physical and emotional abuse, involuntary servitude, and marital fraud. Marital fraud? Daniel lied to you about his financial situation. He made you believe he was successful and independent. That is fraud, especially if the lie induced the marriage. "Perfect," said Sarah. "What else?" "Second, we file a criminal complaint against Daniel for domestic violence. We have the photos, Sarah's testimony, and he pulled out his phone. I have a doctor friend who will examine Sarah and document all injuries, old and new." "Will that be enough?" I asked. "You said the Sterlings have contacts. They have contacts in the local police, but my friend is a forensic doctor. She works directly with the district attorney, and the district attorney is not as easy to buy as a local sheriff." "And the third step?" Sarah looked at the documents with a mix of fear and hope. "The third step is the sweetest." Matthew smiled. "We expose everything. Daniel's fraud, the origin of Margaret's money, the hidden debts. We publish it in the newspapers. The Sterlings live on their reputation. Without it, they are nothing." "But that won't send them to jail," I said. "No, but it will destroy them socially. And for people like the Sterlings, that is worse than jail. No one will want to do business with them. No one will invite them to events. Their friends will disappear. And without those contacts, they won't be able to protect baby Daniel from the domestic violence charge. It was brilliant. It was cruel. It was exactly what we needed. How long will it take? I asked. A month to prepare everything. 2 months to get to trial. But Matthew raised a finger. We can pressure them starting now. As soon as we file the documents, Daniel and Margaret will come to negotiate. I don't want to negotiate, said Sarah with a firm voice I hadn't heard in years. I want them to pay for what they did. Matthew looked at her with approval. Good, because I don't want to negotiate either. I want to see them destroyed. We left Matthew's office with a solid plan and a folder full of documents to sign. Sarah was more animated than I had seen her in 3 years. Do you really think it will work? She asked me while we walked through the city streets. I know it will work, because people like the Sterlings have a fundamental flaw. They think they are untouchable, and that arrogance makes them careless, like leaving documents on the desk. Exactly. I smiled. Daniel thought I was too stupid to understand what I was seeing. Margaret thought I was too scared to do anything about it. Both were wrong. That afternoon, I took Sarah to the doctor Matthew had recommended. Dr. Helen Ross was a serious woman of about 50 who examined my daughter with professional but humane care. You have old fractures in 2 ribs, said Helen while reviewing the x-rays, probably from 3 or 4 months ago. You also have scars on your back consistent with repeated blows with a flat object. A belt? Sarah nodded, unable to speak. And these bruises on your arms are recent, from a week ago, I would say. Helen took photos of everything. Sarah, I need you to understand something. What has happened to you is serious, very serious. This is not a bad marriage. This is systematic abuse and torture. I know, Sarah whispered. Good, because I am going to document everything and I am going to testify in your case. And I promise you that man is going to pay. When we left the office, Sarah cried. But this time, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of relief. Finally, someone believes me, she said between sobs. All these months, I thought I was going crazy, that maybe I was the problem. You were never the problem, honey, never. That night, my phone rang. It was a local number I didn't recognize. Yes? Linda. Daniel's voice was tense. We need to talk. We have nothing to talk about. I know you went to see a lawyer. That surprised me. Are you following me? It's a small world. I have friends everywhere. Friends, I repeated. What a generous word for people who owe you favors because you gave them stolen money. Silence. Then, you don't know what you are talking about. I know exactly what I am talking about. I know about the fake invoices. I know about the casino debts. I know your precious life is a lie built on fraud and stolen money. Careful, Linda. You are playing a very dangerous game. No, Daniel. You are playing a dangerous game. I am just finishing it. My mother can make your life very difficult. Your mother? I laughed. You mean the woman who built her fortune being the mistress of a married man? That mother? Another silence. Longer this time. How? Like I said, I know a lot of things, and soon everyone is going to know those same things. This is extortion. No, dear, this is justice. Extortion is what you did to Sarah, forcing her to work like a slave under threat of violence. I am just making sure the world knows who you really are. What do you want? I don't want anything from you anymore. 3 days ago, maybe I would have accepted money to keep my mouth shut. But now I have seen what you did to my daughter. Now I know you are an abusive coward who hits women smaller than him to feel like a man. So I don't want your dirty money. I want to see you fall. Linda. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but from adrenaline, not fear. Sarah was looking at me with wide eyes. Was it him? Yes. What did he say? Empty threats. Panic disguised as bravado. I smiled. Daniel finally understands he is in trouble. Do you think he'll try to do something? Probably. But I lifted my phone. I recorded the whole conversation, including the part where he basically admitted the fake invoices. Sarah laughed. It was a real, genuine laugh, which I hadn't heard from her in years. "Mom, you are a criminal." "No, honey, I am a mother protecting her daughter. The criminals are them." And while the city lights shone outside our window, I knew the Sterlings had finally found someone who didn't let herself be intimidated by their money, their connections, or their threats. They had found Linda Davis, and that had been their fatal mistake. At 7 the next morning, Matthew called with news. The documents were filed. Officially, Sarah is filing for divorce, and there is a temporary restraining order against Daniel. "How long until they find out?" I asked. "They probably already know. Daniel's lawyers will be notified this morning. We didn't have to wait long." At 9:30 a.m., while Sarah and I were having breakfast at a cafe near the hotel, my phone exploded with calls. Daniel, Margaret, unknown numbers, all trying to contact me. I ignored every call. At 10:15, a text message arrived from Daniel. "We need to talk in person. I will compensate you for any trouble. Please." I deleted the message. At 11, Margaret called me. This time, I answered. I put the phone on speaker so Sarah could hear. "Who do you think you are?" Margaret's voice trembled with rage. "How dare you attack my family? Good morning, Margaret. Did you sleep well? Listen to me well. Insignificant nobody. Ah, there it is. The classism coming to the surface. Please continue. I am recording this call." Silence. "What do you want?" Her voice was now more controlled. "I already told you I don't want anything. Everyone wants something. Money? A house? I can give you $50,000. Sarah withdraws the lawsuit and we never talk about this again. $50,000, I repeated. For 3 years of torture, for beatings, for humiliation, for servitude. Is that what it is worth to you? 100,000. It is my final offer. No. What do you want then? I want Daniel arrested. I want your reputation ruined. I want everyone to know what kind of monsters you are. You are a vengeful, crazy woman. No, Margaret. I am a mother, and you should know better than anyone what a mother is capable of doing to protect her daughter. After all, I paused for effect. You set a very good example when you asked Samuel Cole for money to secure your children's future. The silence that followed was absolute. I could imagine her face, the blood draining, eyes widening, panic setting in. How? Her voice was barely a whisper. I told you I know a lot of things. Samuel was very meticulous with his records, and it turns out someone close to him decided it was time for the truth to come to light. No one will believe you. No, I have documents. Bank transfers from Samuel's account to yours, dated right after John's death. Letters where you asked him for more money, threatening to tell his wife about you two. Photographs of you two together. Do you want me to continue? Is this blackmail? This is consequence. For 30 years, you built an empire based on lies. You raised 3 entitled children who think they can do whatever they want because they have money. And now, one of those children almost killed my daughter. So no, Margaret, this is not blackmail. This is justice. My lawyer is going to destroy you. Your lawyer can try. But meanwhile, what do you think will happen when the Chronicle publishes the story of the respectable Margaret Sterling and her past as a secret mistress? How many of your bridge friends will keep answering your calls? She hung up. Sarah looked at me with a mix of awe and pride. Mom, that was brutal? I finished for her. Yes, but people like Margaret only understand one language, power. And now she knows I have the power in this situation. That afternoon, Matthew called us to say that Daniel's lawyers had requested an urgent meeting. They wanted to negotiate. Are we going? Asked Sarah. Of course, but not to negotiate, to see how desperate they are. The meeting was in a fancy office downtown. Daniel's lawyer, a smug man named Stephen Carter, received us with a fake smile. Ladies, thank you for coming. I think we can resolve this situation in a civilized manner. Civilized? I repeated, sitting down. Interesting choice of words, considering your client beat my daughter repeatedly. There are two sides to every story, said Stephen. Oh, really? What is Daniel's side? That she deserved to be beaten? Stephen cleared his throat uncomfortably. My client is willing to offer a generous compensation, $200,000, and Sarah signs a confidentiality agreement. No, said Sarah before I could answer. I will not sign anything that forces me to lie about what happened. Miss Sarah, be reasonable. I am reasonable. Your client is the one who was unreasonable when he broke 2 of my ribs. Stephen looked at his papers, clearly uncomfortable. $300,000, but that is the limit. Is that all it is worth? Asked Sarah. 3 years of my life? My health? My dignity? My client also requires that all criminal charges be dropped. I laughed. Of course, because what really matters to Daniel isn't Sarah. It's not going to jail. Mrs. Linda, listen to me well, Stephen. We are not going to drop the charges. We are not going to sign any confidentiality agreement, and we are not going to let Daniel hide behind his mommy's money. You are making a mistake. The mistake was Daniel's when he thought he could buy a wife and treat her like a slave. The mistake was Margaret's when she thought her money made her untouchable. And your mistake, I stood up, was thinking you would intimidate me with fancy offices and legal threats. We left that meeting straight to the office of the Chronicle. Matthew had arranged a meeting with Mark White, an investigative journalist who specialized in exposing corrupt rich families. Mark was about 40, with the tired look of someone who has seen too much human evil. He listened to our story without interrupting, taking occasional notes. Do you have proof of all this? He asked finally. Matthew put a thick folder on the desk, photographs of Sarah's injuries, detailed medical report, financial documents showing Daniel's fraud, and he pulled out another folder, the complete story of the origin of Margaret's money. Mark reviewed everything meticulously. When he finished, he whistled softly. This is dynamite. The Sterlings are going to try to stop me. Can you handle them? I asked. I have been exposing people like them for 20 years. They have tried to bribe me, threaten me. They even attacked me once, but they have never stopped me. He smiled, and they won't start now. When can you publish it? Give me a week to verify everything and talk to additional sources. Then it will be the cover story. That night, back at the hotel, Sarah was restless. Do you think we are doing the right thing? Once this is published, there is no going back. Do you want to go back? No, but... She bit her lip. Daniel is going to be furious. Margaret, too. What if they try to hurt us? That is why Matthew already spoke to the police. We have official protection, and Daniel knows that if he touches us, he goes straight to jail. He is a coward, Sarah. Cowards only attack when they know they can win. And what happens after? After the trial and the scandal, I sat next to her. After, we rebuild your life. We go back to Cleveland. You get therapy. You spend time with people who love you. And eventually, when you are ready, you start over. And if I am never ready, you will be ready. Because you are my daughter. And Davis women don't give up. We get up, we heal, and we become stronger. 3 days later, Daniel appeared at our hotel. The receptionist called us to let us know there was a man asking for us. Let him up, I said. Sarah looked at me alarmed. Mom, no. It's okay. It's time for Daniel to see the woman he almost destroyed. When Daniel entered our room, I was surprised by his appearance. He had deep dark circles, his suit wrinkled, and a tremor in his hands. Sarah, he started, but she raised a hand. I don't want to hear your voice. Please, I need to explain. Explain what? How to beat your wife. How to humiliate her in front of your family. How to make her feel she was worth nothing. I was under a lot of pressure. My mother, work, money. I wasn't thinking clearly. Pressure doesn't justify abuse, I said. Millions of people have pressure and don't hit their partners. Daniel turned to me. Linda, please? I know I made mistakes. Mistakes? Sarah has 2 ribs that will never heal correctly. That isn't a mistake. It is a crime. I will do whatever. Therapy, compensation, whatever you want. What I want, said Sarah with a firm voice, is for you to never come near me again. What I want is for you to pay for what you did. And what I want, her voice broke a little, is to understand how the man who promised to love me could hurt me so much. Daniel collapsed into a chair. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. Your apologies mean nothing, I told him. Apologies without change are manipulation, and you aren't going to change. Because to change, first you have to admit that the problem is you. And people like you never admit that. Please don't publish the story. My mother, this will destroy her. Like your mother destroyed Maria? I asked. Daniel blinked, confused. The Mexican housekeeper your mother falsely accused of theft 10 years ago. Do you remember her? She had to leave the state. She could never come back. That was different. It wasn't. Your family ruins lives when it suits them. Now it's your turn to understand how it feels. Daniel looked at both of us, looking for some sign of weakness. He found none. They will hate you, he said finally. Everyone will think you are vengeful extortionists. Let them think what they want, said Sarah. I prefer them to hate me telling the truth than love me based on lies. Daniel left without saying anything else. When the door closed, Sarah exhaled shakily. Did I do well? You did perfectly. I hugged her. You looked him in the eyes and told him he no longer has power over you. That is the bravest thing I have seen. The next day, Mark White called. The story comes out tomorrow. Front page, the hidden face of the Sterlings, fraud, abuse, and lies. Are you ready? Ready, I confirmed. That night, I barely slept. I knew tomorrow the Sterling world would explode and Sarah and I would be at the center of that explosion. But I was ready. Because sometimes justice requires a little chaos, and I was more than willing to create all the chaos necessary. Mark White's article appeared on the front page of the Chronicle with a photograph of the Sterling estate. The headline in huge letters said, "Behind the Golden Walls, the dark secret of a respectable family." Matthew brought 5 copies of the newspaper to our hotel. Sarah and I read every word. Mark hadn't spared details. He described the systematic abuse Sarah had suffered. He published the photographs of her injuries, with her face pixelated to protect her identity. He exposed Daniel's fraud, with specific numbers and dates. And in the center of the article, he revealed the truth about Margaret and Samuel Cole. This family, which for decades has represented the cream of society, is built on a foundation of deceit, wrote Mark. The money that funded their lifestyle came not from business investments, as has been proclaimed for years, but from an extramarital relationship that Margaret Sterling exploited for her personal benefit. My phone started ringing immediately. Unknown numbers, all ignored. But at 9:30 a.m., I received a call I did answer. The district attorney. Mrs. Davis, I am DA Andrea Lawrence. I read the article this morning. I need to speak with you and your daughter as soon as possible. We met with DA Lawrence in her office 2 hours later. She was a woman of about 50, with short black hair and an expression that tolerated no nonsense. I have reviewed your daughter's medical report and the photographs, she said, looking directly at Sarah. Are you willing to testify against Daniel Sterling? Yes, answered Sarah without hesitation. I need to warn you that the process will be difficult. The defense will try to discredit you. They will say you are lying for money, that you provoked the incidents, that you are an outsider trying to take advantage of a respectable family. Let them try, said Sarah. I have the scars to prove my story. What do they have? DA Lawrence smiled. I like you. Good. We will be filing formal charges against Daniel Sterling for domestic violence, aggravated assault, and unlawful imprisonment. We are also investigating financial fraud. If we find enough evidence, he will face additional charges. And Margaret, I asked? For now, we don't have enough to accuse her of direct complicity. But, the DA paused significantly, we are reviewing the source of her fortune. If we find tax irregularities, she will also face charges. After leaving the DA's office, Matthew took us to lunch at a small restaurant far from downtown. While we waited for the food, I checked social media on my phone. The article had exploded. Sterling family. It was trending on Twitter. The comments were brutal. I always knew that family was fake. No one is that perfect. Poor girl. 3 years of torture in that house. And the police never did anything. Typical. The rich are always protected. But there were also defenders of the Sterlings. This is clearly an extortion maneuver. An outsider looking to get money out of an honorable family. Where's the real proof? Anyone can invent stories. Margaret Sterling has done a lot for this city. This is a smear campaign. People are divided, I observed, showing the phone to Sarah. They always will be, said Matthew. But what matters is that the story is out. The Sterlings can no longer control the narrative. He was right. Because 3 hours later, news stations started covering the story. I saw a segment where a panel of 3 journalists debated the case. If the allegations are true, this is appalling, said a woman. But we need to remember that Daniel Sterling is innocent until proven guilty. Innocent? Another journalist interrupted her. Have you seen the medical photographs? That woman has injuries consistent with prolonged abuse. Photographs can be faked, or they can be real evidence of a horrible crime. Why do we immediately assume the victim is lying? The debate continued, but I had already won what I needed: visibility. The Sterlings could no longer hide behind fake smiles and well-placed contacts. That afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. Something told me to answer. Linda? It was a woman's voice, older, that I didn't recognize. Who is speaking? I am Claudia Ross. I was a friend of Margaret. Well, she paused bitterly. I thought I was her friend. What do you want? I want you to know that I believe you. Your daughter, I mean. I have been in that house many times. I have seen how Margaret treats people. And I always suspected there was something wrong with Daniel, the way he looked at women, as if they were objects. Why are you calling me? Because I want to testify, not about the abuse. I didn't witness it directly, but I can testify about the character of the Sterlings, about how Margaret mistreated her employees, about the parties where Daniel drank until he blacked out and then got aggressive. Are you willing to do that publicly? Yes. Margaret excluded me from her circle 2 years ago because I criticized how she treated her current housekeeper, a girl from the Philippines. Margaret yelled at her, thinking no one else would understand. But my daughter-in-law is Filipina. I know exactly what she was saying. Horrible things. Do you have the name of that housekeeper? Maria Santos. She still works for them. Well, worked. I read in another article that she quit this morning. That was valuable information. I thanked Claudia and called Matthew immediately. We need to find Maria Santos. I told him if she worked for the Sterlings recently, she can corroborate the abusive behavior. Matthew worked his legal magic. And 2 days later, Maria Santos was sitting in his office. She was a small woman of about 35, with tired eyes but a dignified posture. I worked for Mrs. Sterling for 2 years, she said. It was the worst time of my life. Can you tell us what happened? I asked gently. Maria took a deep breath. Mrs. Sterling treated me like trash. She made me work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. She paid me $400 a month when the legal wage is much higher. And if I made the smallest mistake, she yelled at me. She called me stupid, dirty, useless. Did you know Sarah had left the house when she did? No. The Sterlings told me she had traveled to Cleveland for a family emergency. I had no access to internet or television, and they didn't allow me to talk to anyone outside the house. It was only when a neighbor gave me an old newspaper weeks later, and I read the article that I understood Sarah had escaped. That same day, I quit. Did you see how they treated Sarah? Yes, I saw how Mrs. Sterling yelled at her. I saw the bruises. Once I found Sarah crying in the kitchen after midnight. She told me Mr. Daniel had pushed her against the wall. Did she tell you anything else? She asked me to help her escape, to call someone. But I was afraid. The Sterlings threatened to deport me if I spoke, so I did nothing. Maria started to cry. I hate myself for that. I should have helped. Sarah got up and hugged Maria. It isn't your fault. They intimidated you too. Maria wiped her tears. When I read the article, I knew I had to speak. I can't undo what I didn't do, but I can make sure that family pays. Would you testify at the trial? Asked Matthew. Yes, and I have something else. Maria pulled out her phone. I recorded videos of Mrs. Sterling yelling at me, of Mr. Daniel drunk and aggressive. I never knew what to do with them, but now I think they can help. The videos were devastating. In one, Margaret yelled at Maria, calling her every insult imaginable. In another, Daniel, visibly drunk, threw plates on the floor while yelling about incompetence. And in a third, filmed from the hallway, Daniel could be heard yelling at Sarah, followed by the unmistakable sound of something hitting the wall. This is crucial evidence, said Matthew, his eyes shining. With this, the case is practically closed. That night we shared a bottle of wine at our hotel. Sarah was more relaxed than I had seen her in months. You know what is the strangest thing? She said, looking at her glass. I feel guilty. Why? For destroying their life. I know they are horrible, but part of me still wonders if I went too far. Sarah, look at me. I waited until her eyes found mine. They destroyed your life first. They broke you. They turned you into a shadow of yourself. And then they expected you to stay quiet and grateful. You didn't go too far. You are barely evening the scales. Don't you feel guilty? I thought about it. No, I feel triumphant. Because for 3 years, that family thought they were untouchable. They thought their money and their contacts would protect them from consequences. And now they are learning that isn't so. The Sterlings are going to hate us forever. Probably. But you know what? We will live. We will survive. And eventually we will thrive. While they are going to spend the rest of their lives dealing with the consequences of their actions. When can we go home? After the trial. In about 6 weeks. I miss Cleveland. I miss my life. Then we will build a new one. A better one. One where no one treats you like trash. Sarah smiled. Thank you, Mom, for coming. For saving me. You don't have to thank me. I am your mother. It is literally my job. Not all mothers would do it. Then the other mothers are doing their job wrong. The next morning, Matthew called with updates. The DA is speeding up the case. With Maria's evidence, they want to proceed quickly. The trial will be in 4 weeks. So fast? The DA thinks she has a solid case. And I think the Sterlings are panicking. Their lawyer already tried to negotiate 3 times this week. What are they offering? Last offer, $500,000. All charges dropped. And Sarah claims she will never speak publicly about the case. And our answer? I told them to shove their money where the sun doesn't shine. I laughed. I like you a lot, Matthew. The feeling is mutual, Linda. Now get ready because the trial will be brutal. Stephen Carter is a ruthless lawyer. He will try to destroy Sarah on the stand. Let him try, said Sarah, listening on speaker. He doesn't scare me anymore. And in her eyes, I saw the truth of those words. My daughter, who had entered that estate 3 years ago full of hope and love, was now forged in steel. The Sterlings had broken her, but in doing so, they had accidentally created something much more dangerous. A woman who no longer had anything to lose. And that, I thought with satisfaction, was going to be their final doom. The trial began on a rainy Monday in October. The courtroom was full of journalists, curious people, and a small but loud group of Sterling supporters. Margaret was sitting in the front row, dressed completely in black as if she were in mourning, with her 2 daughters on each side. Daniel, on the other hand, looked disheveled and nervous at the defense table. Stephen Carter. His lawyer was exactly as Matthew had warned, a man of about 55 with perfectly styled silver hair, a $5,000 suit, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. D.A. Lawrence presented the case methodically. She showed the photographs of Sarah's injuries. She played Maria's videos. She presented Dr. Ross's medical reports. "This is not a complicated case," said the DA in her opening statement. "It is the story of a weak man who compensates for his own inadequacy with violence. A man who, protected by his family's money and status, believed he could abuse his wife without consequences. When it was Stephen's turn, his strategy was predictable. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you are seeing is not evidence of abuse, it is evidence of an elaborate extortion. Miss Davis, Mrs. Sterling, came to this city looking for a better life, and when that life didn't turn out to be the fairy tale she expected, she decided to fabricate accusations to obtain a favorable financial settlement." I looked at Sarah. She was clenching her fists, but her face remained serene. We had practiced for this. The prosecution's first witness was Dr. Ross. Her testimony was devastating. The injuries I documented on Sarah Davis are consistent with sustained physical abuse over a period of at least 18 months. The fractured ribs, in particular, show evidence of having healed without proper medical treatment, suggesting the victim was prevented from seeking medical attention. "Could these injuries have been self-inflicted?" asked Stephen in cross-examination. "No. The rib fractures, in particular, are located in areas that would be virtually impossible to reach and fracture by oneself. Furthermore, the bruising pattern on the upper arms is consistent with being grabbed forcefully repeatedly. But is it possible the fractures were the result of an accident? A fall, perhaps? Broken ribs were caused by direct and significant impact, not a fall. And the fact that there are 2 fractures on opposite sides of the torso with approximately a month's difference in healing strongly suggests 2 separate incidents of intentional trauma. Stephen had no further questions. The second day, Maria Santos testified. She spoke about the atmosphere at the Sterling estate, about the constant yelling, about finding Sarah crying. "Did you ever see the defendant hit the plaintiff?" asked DA Lawrence. "Not directly, but once I heard a loud thud and then Sarah scream. When I went to see, Mr. Daniel was standing over her while she was on the floor, holding her side. He saw me and told me to get out, that if I said anything, he would have me deported. And the videos you presented as evidence? I filmed them with my phone while I was cleaning. I kept the phone in my apron pocket, recording. No one suspected because I was always cleaning nearby, and they treated me as if I were invisible, as if it didn't matter that I saw or heard them." In cross-examination, Stephen tried to attack Maria's credibility. "Miss Santos, isn't it true you were fired for theft?" "No. I quit after reading about Sarah's abuse. I could no longer work for that family. But did you seek employment with other families in the city?" "Yes. And were you rejected by several families after the Sterlings gave negative references?" "Yes. So you have a motive to lie about my clients. You are resentful because they ruined your employment prospects." Maria looked directly at him. "I am not lying. Everything I said is true. And if my employment prospects are ruined, it is because I spoke the truth about an abusive family. That doesn't make me a liar. It makes them monsters." The murmur in the room was immediate. The judge had to ask for order. The third day was Sarah's turn. While she walked to the stand, I saw Margaret looking at her with pure hatred. Daniel didn't look at her at all. DA Lawrence guided her through her testimony with care. Sarah described her marriage, the gradual change in Daniel's behavior, the first time he hit her. "What happened after the first incident of violence?" asked the DA. "Daniel cried. He told me it would never happen again, that he was under a lot of stress. I wanted to believe him. But it happened again?" "Yes, 2 weeks later." "And what did you do?" "Nothing. Because by then he had already isolated me completely. I had no friends here. My family was in Cleveland, and Margaret had made it very clear that if I caused trouble, they would ruin me." "Were you afraid of the defendant?" "Yes, every day. I never knew what would make him angry. Sometimes it was the food, sometimes it was how I dressed. Once he hit me because I smiled at a waiter in a restaurant. Why didn't you leave sooner?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Because they made me believe it was my fault, that if I were a better wife, a better cook, more sophisticated, He wouldn't have to discipline me. They brainwashed me to think I deserved the abuse. When Stephen began his cross-examination, it was brutal. Mrs. Sterling, isn't it true you signed a prenuptial agreement? Yes. And that agreement established that in case of divorce, you would not receive any part of my client's assets? Yes. So by divorcing, you would gain nothing financially. Unless, of course, you could accuse my client of abuse and get a settlement. I don't want his money. I just want my life back. But you filed a lawsuit for $800,000 in damages. My lawyer filed that lawsuit. I just want Daniel to go to jail. Why are you angry with him? Because he broke 2 of my ribs. Because he made me feel less than human. Because he needs to pay for what he did. Or because your fairy tale marriage didn't turn out as you expected. And now you are taking revenge. My marriage wasn't a fairy tale. It was a nightmare. And the only person who needs revenge is Daniel. Because finally, someone is telling him no. Stephen tried to pressure her on minor inconsistencies in her story, about why she hadn't sought help earlier, about why there was no photographic evidence of the injuries when they occurred. Because I was ashamed, said Sarah finally. Because I thought it was my fault. Because they had convinced me that if I reported it, no one would believe me. And frankly, she looked directly at Stephen. Seeing how you are treating me now, they were right. The 4th day, the defense presented their witnesses. Friends of Daniel testified he was a gentle man who would never raise a hand against a woman. The family's personal doctor suggested Sarah's injuries could have been caused by natural clumsiness. But the most memorable witness was Margaret. She went up to the stand impeccably dressed, with jewelry that probably cost more than my house in Cleveland. Her voice was firm and clear when she spoke. My son is innocent. This woman, she pointed at Sarah with contempt, came to our house with fraudulent intentions from the start. She faked love to secure an advantageous marriage. And when she realized she wouldn't get the lifestyle she expected, she fabricated these horrible accusations. Mrs. Sterling, said D.A. Lawrence in cross-examination, isn't it true that you forced Sarah to perform extensive household chores? I asked her to contribute to the household. It is what wives do in respectable families. Does contributing to the household include cleaning toilets with a toothbrush? That is ridiculous. We have Maria Santos's testimony confirming that happened. Maria Santos is a resentful liar. And Mrs. Claudia Ross, is she also a liar? For the first time, I saw Margaret waver. Claudia was always envious of our family, or she simply saw the truth about how you treat people. Objection! Stephen jumped up. Withdrawn! The DA smiled. No more questions. The 5th day was dedicated to closing arguments. D.A. Lawrence was direct and passionate. This case is simple. A man abused his wife for years. The evidence is overwhelming. The photographs, the videos, the medical testimonies, everything points to the same conclusion. Daniel Sterling is guilty. Stephen, for his part, appealed to emotion and prejudice. Are we really going to ruin a respectable man's life based on the accusations of an outsider woman who clearly has a financial motive? Without direct evidence, without eyewitnesses of the alleged abuses, the jury retired to deliberate. Sarah, Matthew, and I waited in a small room in the courthouse. How long do you think it will take? Asked Sarah, biting her nails. It can be hours or days, said Matthew, but I have a good feeling. It took 4 hours. When we returned to the room, the jury looked serious. The jury foreman stood up with a paper in his hand. On the charge of domestic violence, we find the defendant guilty. The air left my lungs. Sarah started crying. Daniel went pale. On the charge of aggravated assault, we find the defendant guilty. Margaret jumped up. This is an outrage. My son is innocent. The judge banged his gavel. Order, Mrs. Sterling, sit down or you will be removed from the courtroom. On the charge of unlawful imprisonment, we find the defendant guilty. Daniel collapsed in his chair. Stephen put a hand on his shoulder but looked defeated. The judge looked at Daniel. Mr. Sterling, you have been found guilty of 3 serious charges. Sentencing will take place in 2 weeks. Until then, you will remain in custody without bail." 2 officers approached Daniel. When they put the handcuffs on him, Margaret screamed, "This isn't over! We will appeal! We will fight this!" But her words sounded hollow, because everyone in that room knew the truth. It was over. Daniel Sterling, the golden son of a respectable family, was going to jail. Outside the courthouse, journalists surrounded us. Sarah read a prepared statement. Today, justice was done. But this isn't just about me. It is about all women trapped in abusive relationships, the ones who are afraid to speak, the ones who think no one will believe them. I am here to tell you. Speak up. Seek help. Because abusers only have power when victims are afraid. That night in our hotel, we toasted with cheap champagne. "We did it," said Sarah, still in disbelief. "We really did it." "You did it," I corrected her. "I just gave you a push, a giant push." She laughed. "Mom, can I ask you something? Anything. Were you ever afraid? During all this, were you afraid it wouldn't work?" "Terrified," I admitted, "every day. But I was more afraid of what would happen if we did nothing. If I left you in that house. If the Sterlings got away with it. You are the bravest woman I know." "No, honey. You are the brave one. I am just a mother doing what mothers do, protecting their children." 2 weeks later, we returned to court for sentencing. Daniel looked gaunt after his time in custody. Margaret was not present. According to Matthew, she had suffered a nervous breakdown and was in a private hospital. The judge had no mercy. "Mr. Sterling, your crimes are particularly heinous because you abused a position of trust. Your wife trusted you to protect her, and you betrayed that trust repeatedly. Therefore, I sentence you to 8 years in prison." 8 years! Sarah squeezed my hand so hard I lost circulation. "Furthermore," continued the judge, "you are forbidden from contacting the victim for the rest of your life." Daniel showed no emotion. He only nodded when the officers took him away. Outside, Matthew gave us more news. The investigation into Margaret found significant tax irregularities. She is facing charges for tax evasion, and the textile company is being audited. It seems Daniel wasn't the only one committing fraud. How much time could she face? If convicted, between 3 and 5 years. But given her health, she will probably serve house arrest. "Good," said Sarah. "I don't need her to go to jail. I just need her to know the consequences are real." "The consequences are very real," confirmed Matthew. "The estate is being foreclosed to pay debts. Ashley and Jessica are facing their own legal problems. The Sterlings, as a family, are destroyed. It was everything we had sought and more. We returned to Cleveland 3 days after the sentencing. When the plane landed, Sarah cried, but this time they were tears of relief. "I am home," she whispered. "I am finally home." The first months were difficult. Sarah had frequent nightmares. She woke up screaming, thinking Daniel was in the room. She started therapy with a psychologist specializing in domestic trauma. "The healing process is not linear," Dr. Martinez explained to me, after a particularly difficult session. Sarah suffered psychological abuse in addition to physical. It will take time for her to rebuild her sense of self. But little by little, I saw improvements. Sarah started smiling more, sleeping through the night, making plans for the future. "I want to go back to college," she told me one afternoon, 6 months after returning. "Finish my architecture degree." "Are you sure it is a lot of work?" "I am sure Daniel took 3 years of my life. I am not going to let him take more." She enrolled in the local university. At first it was overwhelming, but Sarah threw herself into her studies with fierce determination. It was as if every completed project, every passed exam, was a way to reclaim her life. Meanwhile, I followed the news from New York. The Sterling case had become a national scandal. Margaret was sentenced to 4 years of house arrest for tax evasion. The estate was sold at auction. Ashley and her husband divorced after her husband was arrested for fraud. Jessica fled to Europe with her lover. The Sterlings, who had once been the cream of society, were now a joke. an example of how arrogance and abuse eventually collapse. A year after returning to Cleveland, Sarah met someone. His name was Martin. He was a history professor, and she met him at the university. He was gentle, patient, and when Sarah told him about her past, his reaction was perfect. "Thank you for trusting me enough to share that," he said. "And I want you to know you never have to apologize for your past. You are a survivor, not a victim." Sarah cried when she told me that conversation. "Mom, is it possible? Can I really have a normal relationship after everything that happened?" "Honey, what happened with Daniel wasn't a relationship. It was abuse. With Martin, you are starting from zero. And yes, it is absolutely possible to have something beautiful and healthy." 2 years after the trial, I received an unexpected email. It was from Claudia Ross, the former friend of Margaret who had testified. "Dear Linda," she wrote, "I thought you would like to know that Margaret passed away last week. Heart failure. The funeral was small. Only her daughters were present. Daniel tried to get permission to attend from prison, but was denied. I thought Sarah would want to know that this chapter finally closed." I showed the email to Sarah. I expected to feel something, relief, sadness, satisfaction, but I only felt emptiness. "How do you feel?" I asked. "I feel nothing," said Sarah slowly. "Is that bad?" "No. It means you have truly moved on. Margaret no longer has power over you, not even in death." 3 years after the trial, Sarah graduated from university with honors. Martin was in the audience along with a group of friends she had made. When she received her diploma, we all stood up and applauded. That night, during the celebration dinner, Sarah raised her glass. "I want to propose a toast to my mom, who literally flew to another city to save me, who taught me it is okay to ask for help, who showed me that strong women don't accept abuse, and who gave me the greatest gift of all, a second chance at life." We all toasted. I tried not to cry and failed miserably. Later, in private, Sarah asked me, "Do you ever regret what we did? Destroying the Sterlings?" "No," I said without hesitation. "They destroyed themselves. We just made sure the world saw who they really were. Sometimes I feel guilty about Margaret, about her death." Sarah listened to me. Margaret spent her life abusing people, employees, daughters-in-law, anyone she considered inferior. Her death was the result of her own decisions, not yours. You don't have to carry that guilt. I know. It's just, sometimes I think about how things could have been if they had been different, if they had been kind, but they weren't. And that is the important part. 4 years after the trial, Sarah and Martin got married. The wedding was in a small garden outside Cleveland with 30 people. Simple, beautiful, full of love. When it was time for my speech, I spoke about second chances, about the strength that comes from surviving the unthinkable, and about how sometimes the families we choose are stronger than the ones we were given. Daniel told Sarah she was useless. I said, looking at my daughter radiant in her simple lace dress. He told her she would never be enough. He told her no one else would want her. Today, she marries a man who adores her. She has a successful career. She has friends who support her. And she has a life she built from the ashes of her worst nightmare. So Daniel, wherever you are, I want you to know something. You failed. My daughter didn't just survive. She thrived. The room erupted in applause. Sarah hugged me and whispered, "I love you, Mom. Thank you for never giving up on me. I never would. You are my greatest achievement." 5 years after the trial, Daniel was released from prison for good behavior, having served 5 of the 8 years of his sentence. According to the news, he moved to a small town in the Midwest. "Do you think he'll try to contact me?" Sarah asked when she saw the news. "He can't. The restraining order is for life. And if he does, he goes straight back to jail. But what if—" "Sarah, look at me. Daniel is a 43-year-old man who has spent 5 years in prison. He has lost everything. His family, his reputation, his status. He isn't a threat. He is just a pathetic man trying to find his place in a world that no longer wants him. And I was right. Daniel never tried to contact her. According to reports, he was working in a warehouse. The powerful Sterlings had fallen as low as possible. 6 years after the trial, Sarah opened her own architecture firm. It was small, just her and 2 associates, but she was proud. Her first project was designing a shelter for women victims of domestic violence. "I want it to be a place where women feel safe," she explained, showing me the blueprints, "where they can rebuild their lives without fear." The shelter was completed a year later. The opening ceremony was emotional. Sarah spoke about her own experience, about how a single act of bravery from her mother had changed everything. "Women in abusive situations often feel they have no options," she said, "that they are trapped. But there are always options. There is always help. You just need the courage to ask for it." After her speech, a young woman approached her. She had bruises barely covered by makeup. "I need help," she whispered. Sarah took her hand. "You are in the right place. We are going to help you." Seeing my daughter, who had been so broken by abuse, now helping other women in the same situation, filled me with a pride I cannot describe with words. 7 years after the trial, I received a letter. The sender was Jessica Sterling. "Dear Linda," she wrote, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I wouldn't blame you, but I feel I owe you an apology. For years, I looked the other way while my mother and brother abused Sarah. I told myself it wasn't my problem, but I was wrong. I was complicit with my silence. Since everything collapsed, I have been in therapy. I have been facing what I allowed to happen, and I want Sarah to know I am sorry, that I deeply regret every moment I didn't speak. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand the damage I caused." I showed the letter to Sarah. She read it several times. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think it is a start. I don't forgive what she did, but acknowledging the mistake is more than Daniel or Margaret ever did. Are you going to answer?" "Maybe. Eventually. When I am ready." 8 years after the trial, Sarah and Martin had their first child, a boy they named Ralph, like my father. When I held my grandson for the first time, I thought about everything we had gone through to get to this moment. The pain, the fear, the legal battles. Everything was worth it for this instant. Sarah healthy and happy with a family that loved her. "Mom," said Sarah from the hospital bed, "I want Ralph to know his story. Not the dark details, but I want him to know his mom survived something terrible and came out stronger. I want him to grow up knowing it is okay to ask for help, that it is okay to be vulnerable, and that real men never, never hurt the women they love. We will teach him together, I promised." 9 years after the trial, I received another piece of news. Ashley Sterling had written a memoir titled Behind the Golden Walls, Growing Up in an Abusive Family. In it, she described the toxic environment of the Sterling estate, Margaret's control, and how everyone had been complicit in Sarah's abuse. "Is she trying to make money off our suffering?" Sarah asked when she saw the book in a bookstore. "Maybe," I said, "or maybe she is trying to process her own trauma. The Sterling family didn't just hurt you, they also damaged their own children." Sarah bought the book but didn't read it immediately. "Someday," she said, "when I am ready." 10 years after the trial, Sarah was invited to give a TED Talk about survival and resilience. I was in the audience crying like the proud mother I was while she told her story. 10 years ago, she said, standing on that stage with confidence and grace, I was a broken woman. I had lost everything, my self-esteem, my identity, my hope. But my mother taught me something crucial, that asking for help isn't weakness. It is the bravest form of strength. And today I am here, not as a victim, but as a survivor, as a woman who built a beautiful life from the ruins of her worst nightmare. The audience stood up. The applause lasted 3 full minutes. After the talk, dozens of women approached Sarah. Each one had their own story of abuse, of survival, of rebuilding. This, I told Sarah that night, this is why it was worth fighting. Not only was it worth it, she said, it was necessary. 11 years after the trial, something unexpected happened. Daniel Sterling published an open letter in a newspaper. To Sarah Davis, he wrote, "I have spent 11 years thinking about what I did to you, 11 years facing the consequences of my actions. I have been in therapy. I have worked on understanding why I believed I had the right to hurt you. And I want you to know you were right about everything. I was a coward, an abuser, a man who compensated for his own inadequacy with violence. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that not a day goes by without me regretting every blow, every insult, every moment of terror I caused you. If I could go back and change everything, I would, but I can't. So the only thing I can do is live the rest of my life trying to be better. Not for you. You no longer deserve to have to think about me, but because it is the right thing. I am sorry, Sarah, for everything." Sarah read the letter in silence. Then she folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Empty," she said. 11 years late, 11 years after it really mattered. Am I supposed to applaud him for finally admitting what we all already knew? You don't have to feel anything. You don't owe him anything, I know. It's just, part of me wanted this moment to feel more significant, like the final closing of a chapter. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels like nothing. Maybe that is the true closure, when the person who hurt you no longer has any emotional power over you. Maybe, agreed Sarah. Maybe the true end was years ago, when I stopped thinking about him every day, when I stopped having nightmares, when I built a life so full that he became just a footnote in my story. That night, Sarah burned the letter in the fireplace of her house. Martin and I were with her. "I don't need his apology," she said, watching the paper turn to ash. "I have already forgiven myself for being vulnerable, for trusting the wrong person, for taking so long to ask for help. And that is the only forgiveness that really matters." 12 years after the trial, my grandson Ralph was 3 years old. He was a bright, curious boy who asked 1,000 questions about everything. "Grandma," he asked me one day, "why does Mommy sometimes get sad?" "Because your mom is very brave," I explained. "And sometimes brave people have sad moments remembering hard times. Like when she got hurt," Sarah had told us, in terms appropriate for his age, that she had been in a difficult relationship before meeting Martin. Yes, like when she got hurt, but now she is better, right? Much better. Because she is strong, and because she has people who love her. "I love her a lot," said Ralph with the seriousness of a 3-year-old. "I know, my love." And that love makes her stronger every day. 13 years after the trial, I received a call from lawyer Matthew Richardson. He was 73 years old now, but still practicing law. "Linda, I thought you would like to know that the state just passed a stricter law on domestic violence, inspired in part by the Sterling case. Now the police have to act immediately on abuse reports, regardless of the family's connections. That is incredible. Your daughter helped change the laws. Her bravery in testifying, the publicity of the case, everything contributed to this reform. You should be proud," I told Sarah. She cried, but this time of joy. "It means something good came out of all that," she said, "that maybe other women won't have to suffer like me because the laws now protect them better. Exactly. Your pain wasn't in vain." 14 years after the trial, Daniel Sterling died in a car accident. He was 48 years old. The news came via an email from Claudia Ross. "I thought you should know," she wrote. Apparently he was driving under the influence of alcohol. He died instantly. I showed the email to Sarah. I expected some strong reaction, relief, sadness, satisfaction. But she only sighed. "It's sad," she said finally. "He wasted his whole life. It could have been different if he had chosen to be better. Are you going to the funeral?" "No. That chapter closed years ago. I don't need to see his body to know it finally ended. And she didn't go. Sarah continued with her life, now completely free from the shadow of Daniel Sterling. 15 years after the trial, on the anniversary of the sentencing, Sarah wrote a letter, not for Daniel, for herself. "Dear Sarah of 28 years," she wrote, "I know right now you feel your life ended, that you will never be happy again, that the damage is too deep to heal, but I want you to know something. You are wrong. In the next 15 years, you will build a life more beautiful than you ever imagined. You will marry a wonderful man. You will have a beautiful son. You will build a successful career. You will help hundreds of women. And one day you will think of Daniel and feel nothing. Because he will become what he always should have been, irrelevant. So hang on, ask for help, accept your mother's love, and trust that although you can't see it now, there is a light at the end of this dark tunnel, and that light is you, stronger, wiser, more complete than you ever were before. With love, Sarah, of 43 years." When she showed me the letter, I hugged her tight. "I am so proud of you," I whispered, "of the woman you have become. I wouldn't have gotten here without you, Mom, without your bravery, without you flying to New York and getting me out of that hell. I would have flown to the end of the world for you. I still would. I know. And that is what saved me." 16 years after the trial, I decided to write this story, our story. Not as a memoir, but as a testimony for other women, other mothers, other survivors. Sarah is now 44 years old. She owns a successful architecture firm. She has 2 children, Ralph, 8 years old, and Sophie, 5. She is married to a man who adores her, and most importantly, she is happy. I am 70 years old. I still work as a nurse, although now part-time. I spend my days off with my grandkids, helping at the shelter Sarah designed, and enjoying the life we almost lost. But there is something else that happened, something Sarah and I kept secret until now, something that explains why the Sterlings fell so completely, so irreversibly. Remember the photos I took of the documents at the estate? The papers on Daniel's desk? Well, there was something else in those papers, something I didn't even tell Matthew at first. Offshore bank accounts, in the Cayman Islands, not Margaret's money. This was money he had been siphoning off for years. Money from his mother's company, yes, but also money from other businesses. It was an elaborate money laundering scheme, and Daniel, in his arrogance, had left not only the account numbers, but also the passwords written in a notebook I photographed. When we discovered this, Matthew and I had a decision to make. We could report it to the authorities and let Daniel face more charges, or we could use it another way. We chose the second option. We contacted an asset recovery specialist, a hacker Matthew knew from a previous case where they had recovered stolen funds for a scammed elderly woman, someone who could access those accounts with the information we had. It took us 6 months to plan every detail, making sure the transfers looked like legitimate movements through shell companies. And slowly, methodically, we transferred all that money, $2.3 million. Half went to Sarah to compensate for the years of abuse and suffering. The other half went to a fund we established for victims of domestic violence, a fund that to this day helps hundreds of women escape abusive situations, pay for therapy, start new lives. Daniel never knew the money disappeared. He was too busy trying to avoid jail to check his offshore accounts, and by the time he got out of prison, it was too late. The money had vanished, passing through enough accounts and transfers that it was impossible to trace it back to us. And why did Daniel never report the theft to the authorities? Because that money was proceeds of laundering. It was completely illegal. If Daniel had admitted he had $2.3 million in undeclared offshore accounts, he would have added additional years to his sentence. So he had to stay quiet, watching his illegal fortune disappear, unable to do anything without incriminating himself further. "Is this what you wanted?" I asked Sarah when I finally told her about the money. Years later, "No," she said, "what I wanted was justice." "But this," she smiled, "this is reparation. Daniel stole years of my life. Now his stolen money is giving lives back to other women. It is poetic in a way. That money has done incredible things. It has paid lawyers for women who couldn't afford them. It has funded shelters. It has provided educational scholarships for survivors who want to rebuild their careers. It has saved lives. And yes, part of that money paid for the house where Sarah now lives with her family, her children's education, her architecture firm. Some would say what we did was theft, that we were no better than Daniel. But I don't see it that way. Daniel stole Sarah's dignity, her health, her peace of mind. We simply reclaimed what he owed. Is it legal? Probably not. Is it moral? Absolutely, because sometimes legal justice is not enough. Sometimes you need to go beyond the courts and sentences. Sometimes you need to make sure the damage caused is truly compensated. Do I regret it? Not for a second. Today, while I write this, Sarah is designing her third shelter for women. Ralph is at soccer practice. Sophie is drawing at the kitchen table. Martin is preparing dinner. And I am sitting in my favorite chair, watching my family and feeling a deep satisfaction. 16 years ago, I entered that villa in the Hamptons and found my daughter on her knees, broken and terrified. Today she is standing, strong, successful, and most importantly, happy. The Sterlings thought they could break her. They thought their money and their status made them untouchable. They thought an ignorant woman from Ohio, like me, couldn't do anything to stop them. They were wrong. Because they underestimated two things: a mother's love and the strength of a woman who finally says, enough. Daniel spent 8 years in prison. Margaret died in disgrace. Ashley wrote a book trying to atone for her guilt. Jessica fled to another country, and their entire empire of lies and abuse collapsed. Meanwhile, Sarah and I built something beautiful from the ashes of that nightmare. Not just our lives, but the lives of hundreds of other women who have passed through our shelter, who have received help from our fund, who have been inspired by Sarah's story. That is the true revenge. Not destruction for destruction's sake, but the transformation of pain into purpose. The Sterlings thought they had won when Daniel married Sarah. They thought they had acquired a free servant, someone they could control and abuse without consequences. But what they really did was wake up two women who refused to be victims, who fought back, who won. And now, 16 years later, as I watch Ralph and Sophie play, free from the shadow of abuse that once darkened our lives, I know one thing for certain. It was worth every moment of fear, every legal battle, every tear shed, because in the end, love won. Justice won. And the Davis women proved we are stronger than any respectable rich family who thinks money can buy the right to hurt others. Daniel Sterling called me a busybody. Margaret called me an insignificant nobody. They thought those insults defined me. They were wrong. I am Linda Davis. I am 70 years old. I am a nurse, mother, grandmother, and the woman who destroyed an entire family of abusers. And if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a single second, because that is what a mother's love looks like: fierce, relentless, victorious. And God, help anyone who messes with my children. Now I am curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you gone through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I am leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites and will definitely surprise you. Thanks for watching until here.